with our guest, Jeff Patton. We are delighted to launch today the 2021 season of School of Product events. And this is the first event of the year, but certainly will not be the last one. Please stay in touch as our teams prepare a series of meetups all year long, of course. And the conference School of Product will be also back again in September. Let me now introduce Maxime, who will be your host for the today meetup. Maxime.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dragos. Well, we're here today, as Dragos said, to welcome Jeff Patton. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, good morning for me. Good afternoon for you. Almost evening.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Max, and I'll be your host today. We welcome you to the School of Product for a special Ask Me Anything session. So during the course of the next hour or so, the community at the School of Product will ask you various questions. And I will pass on myself the questions of the member that could not make it today. But on the other hand, I'm very happy to say that we have actually two members that are here today to carry their own questions to you. And we're delighted to have you today. So, okay, so if that's fine with you, I suggest that we start with the most difficult question of all. Could you please introduce yourself briefly to the audience?
Oh, me. Okay, that is the most difficult question. I'm Jeff Patton. I'm old. I've been in software development for a long time, getting close to 30 years. I'm probably talking to you because, in 2000, I was recruited at a startup that was using a process called extreme programming. So I was very early in at this Agile stuff. And my job title at that company was product manager. So, today, everybody knows that Agile is the new waterfall. We all, back in the 90s and early 2000s, we were all doing waterfall and complaining about it and doing it badly. Now we're all doing Agile and complaining about it and doing it badly. But I've always approached whatever I'm doing from a product perspective. So I've been a product manager for a long time. I've worked as a consultant, and these days I help companies adopt a more product-centric process. And I teach a lot, and I did that story mapping thing.
I'm pretty sure we'll have questions for that, actually. But for the next question, I would like to welcome Aurelia, who's actually here today to ask her own question. Aurelia, off you go.
Yeah, so nice to meet you. So I'm currently working in HR, and there is in my company a special program to become a product manager. So I'm gonna apply, and I'd like to know if you would have any advice for a young or future product manager.
Let me see if I can give you a few pieces of advice, and since my head isn't well organized yet. Every time, so I've been lucky. I've worked with product managers who have just started out and have moved their career forward and now are experts. And every time I ask someone who's an experienced product manager, what advice would you give to someone new? Almost always the first piece of advice I get is talk to your customers more often. Spend time with them, understand them, talk to the people who buy and use your products more often. So that's first piece of advice everybody always gives me. But the other piece of advice I'm going to give you, because I work with organizations that are struggling with this stuff, is you will feel a huge amount of pull to become a good project manager. By that, I mean, your organization will tell you that we need to get these features shipped, or we've got these big roadmap items shipped to get shipped, and it's your job to figure out exactly what they look like and do and get them out on time. And that's not a product management job. What drives a successful product isn't what you ship, it's the outcome or what happens when things come out. And you can ship lots of stuff that no one uses, and it's that moves that focus to outcome. Your organization, everybody believes their ideas are awesome. Your organization is going to push you as a product person to be more of a project manager that focuses on getting more stuff shipped faster. The hard part is helping your organization focus on outcomes. The mantra that I spend a lot of time teaching people in large organizations that don't necessarily understand product thinking is, if you're a product person, you have to work more like a doctor and less like a waiter. If there's a continuum here where on one side there's a waiter and it's your job to take orders and do what people ask you to do or bring things and suggest things, on the other side of that continuum is a doctor, which their job isn't to write every prescription you ask for or schedule every operation. Their job is to focus on your health. Doctors know what an outcome is, or a medical outcome. A medical outcome, a doctor with the best outcomes isn't the one who wrote the most prescriptions. It's the one with the healthiest patients. And when you show up at a doctor's office, the first thing the doctor does is to check your metrics, your KPIs, your weight, your blood pressure, your body temperature, things like that. And then the doctor tells you what the problem or what problems they're observing, or listens to you. And then it's that doctor's posture with your organization. I'm trying to think, there's probably other things, but there's a lot of tactical things, but really understand your customers, and don't fall into the trap of being a project manager. That's the big one. I'm going to stop there. I could ramble for a long time. And actually, I might keep answering your questions as other questions come up, and I'll say, yeah, do that too.
To fire up, yeah. Actually, Thomas from the community who couldn't be here today have asked me to ask you one question. Actually, he's wondering, when you come across someone new to the job of product owner, how do you explain what the concept of user story is?
So again, my one of the part of the reasons I'm here is I started with this process called extreme programming. You should know that that's where the concept of stories came from. The consultant that my company hired in 2000 was Kent Beck, the guy who came up with the concept. And I believe that stories have gone completely sideways, that everybody worries about how they write stories, and that's not the most important thing. What we call them stories because we use stories because written communication fails us. There's no way to specify something in a way that everyone will understand. The creator of stories, Kent Beck, said, look, we should stop relying so heavily on documents. Yes, use them to support your conversation, but we should get together and tell your stories, or tell your story. Stories get their name from how they're meant to be used, not written. A story is the phrase we used to use for stories in the old days is a token for a conversation. If you write a story down, it means we are meant to talk about this. So a story is something you do, not something you write. Yes, we will record all kinds of information. We'll write things in the story. A story, gosh, the basic question is, how do you describe stories? And I just took a lot of words to do that. It's not very concise. It's it's sort of a tough topic, but the primary way I'd answer that is we use stories in order to better communicate. Using stories means that we work together, we collaborate, we focus on building shared understanding, and the purpose isn't to write them any particular way. The purpose is that we have shared understanding where we understand what we're doing. Now, the other concept built into stories is we're meant to talk about outcomes. We're meant to, where output is the feature you're building, and outcome is what your users will do and get benefit out of it. That's why we write stories in this as a user I want format, which is, by the way, just it's training wheels. It's where you start to learn. It's not the right way to write stories. It's a way to help you start thinking about users and what they want. But the reason you talk about outcomes, you don't just describe the feature you want built or the thing you want built. You say, this is who will use it. This is how they will use it. This is how we get benefit. And if you can't tell that part of the story, you shouldn't build it. If you can't explain why or how anybody's going to get value from it, the people building it should want to know why, and you as a product owner should you kind of need to know why. Gosh, I don't know if I answered that clearly, but it's a messier, more subtle topic than you think, and it isn't about writing stories in any particular way. And yeah, another messy answer.
No, that's absolutely fine. You were mentioning building, learning, and actually I was having a conversation with with another Thomas from the community. And he actually had the following statement, and I quote, "We build a lot, we test a little, and probably never enough. And on top of that, we barely learn. When roadmaps are basically about delivering a pile of feature, they seem to lack the flexibility to incorporate learning." And so his question is the following one. Jeff, what do you recommend to facilitate the ability to embrace uncertainty among both product teams and C-level executives?
Let me give you two things. The first thing I ask teams to do, not teams, but organizations to do, is if they've got a roadmap, if there's a bunch of stuff that they built, first thing to do is do a little bit of reflection on what you've built. For everything you've built, how did it go? If they were to rate the outcome on a scale of awesome, where it was every bit as good as we hoped, maybe better, to awful, we released it, we had to apologize for it and roll it back, and everywhere in between, what people quickly figure out is, at best, most organizations have a third of what they build in this awesome zone. And most of what we build doesn't deliver the outcomes that we expect, isn't as successful as we expect. So first thing an organization needs to do is start keeping track of how successful the things they build are. Now, your organization will keep track of its revenue and its costs, but well, it's like if you were a stock portfolio manager, I'd want to track not just the value of my portfolio or what it returned, but I want to track the change in every single asset. If you're a product manager, the assets are the features you build, and you need to track whether you've got the outcome on those, whether it needs to be improved or whether it needs to be pulled from your product's portfolio. So pay attention to what happened. Then the other learning hack is there's a book that I like called Thinking in Bets, where you look, if you ask somebody to think about something as a bet, their head starts working. They start to acknowledge risk a little bit better. You say, okay, look, we're about to build this feature. There's some beliefs we've got. We believe this feature solves a problem for a particular type of user. We believe we can build it in a certain amount of time. We believe that when users see it, they will use it and keep using it. And we believe that enough users will, that it will result in some kind of impact in our organization, some return on investment, some cost savings and things like that. That's all. We're betting a lot here. So I'll tell people, look, this is what you believe. What would you bet me that you're right? Meaning, and let's start low. Would you bet me lunch that you're right? So if we ship this, if we don't get that outcome, we don't get that benefit, you owe me lunch. And they say, yeah, of course I would buy you lunch. Then you say, okay, well, would you bet me a day's pay? And they say, yeah, I would probably bet you a day's pay. Keep raising the bet and see where they break. If they, I work with teams all the time that are building things that they say, I wouldn't bet you lunch, this is going to work. Stakeholders, of course, are super confident. By the way, if you were keeping track, you could show them they shouldn't be so confident because a lot of the things they built historically didn't do as well as they hoped. But if you can say, what would you bet? And see where they break, because your organization is going to spend a lot more than lunch or a day's pay or a week on the beach or a car or a house to build this software. So you want to kind of raise the bet and see where they break or see how confident they are. That's the only thing I've got. People start to figure out they're not always right. That builds a little bit of an appetite for learning. We all suffer from bias, our own optimism bias. We believe all of our ideas are awesome. It is, even if you're a product manager, you're going to suffer from that same kind of bias. You're going to believe your ideas are awesome. One other mantra that comes to mind is when you're designing or when you're thinking, there's an old mantra of design like you're right, test like you're wrong. If you're a product person, you've got to take off your optimism hat and you have to put on that pessimism hat, your black hat, and ask, how might I be wrong? And point out all those things that might go wrong. And that's a skill that a lot of product managers develop, and they have to help the people around them, the leaders in their organization everybody around them start to build a little bit of pessimism. That gives you an appetite for testing and learning. That's all I've got.
Pessimism is something that we all share, given the current circumstances.
Oh yeah. Maybe if anything, the last year has taught us a little bit of pessimism.
I think we all going to become great product manager. Yes, Dragos.
What do you think? Can we take a question live from YouTube? We have some questions. Yeah, okay, yes. Let's say
proof that people are listening. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. So Olga is saying hi, Jeff. She's currently reading the user story mapping book, and her question is, what is the difference between a product roadmap and the user story map?
I said I was going to. This is a question I might have to draw a picture to answer. Maybe I warned I would do this, but let's see if I can explain. If you've got an organization and your organization needs to move forward in the industry, it needs to acquire new customers, it needs to grow, it needs to make money. All that stuff is called our organization strategy. It's how we're going to grow, how we're going to get there. Now, the way things are growing is to build stuff. And strategic thinking is usually quarter by quarter. Where we think ahead. I want to do this in the first quarter, this in the next quarter, this in the next quarter. So oftentimes the way we articulate our strategy should be a roadmap. It's for Q1 and Q2 and Q3, we're going to build these features. Now, what I will ask people to do is to make this roadmap something living and not just say what you're going to build, but talk about the outcome. How will we measure success? So that way we know when we deliver those features and we start measuring, we will see that we didn't get the outcome we wanted and we have a choice to make. Do we deliver the next features, or do we fix these features, or you want that roadmap to be something living. Now, in that roadmap is a feature, an idea that you want to deliver. Now, your job as a product manager is to not deliver it. What I mean by that, in the context of teaching, I will use money, and I've got fake money here. Look, if this is an ideal feature, then what your job is to figure out a series of wins. How do I deliver ideal, but how do I deliver some ideal and some more ideal? And I was looking for my 10 here. So some more ideal. We use strategies like good, better, best, or we land in one market and then we scale it up and scale it up. And look, we get the whole thing, or we stop when we're not there. I use story mapping in order to blow this feature up and slicing that map in order to find our smallest successful release. And we move from win to win to win, where each release is successful, and we stop when we've got enough value. So in your organization's roadmap, there will be big things that you need to deliver, but they're not clearly spelled out. They're not broken down. They're not thought through. That the discovery work hasn't been done. Your job is to unpack those, better understand them, and take that big idea and find a series of wins. And the story map works for that. That's the way I do that. Does that make sense? That's the most concise explanation I've got for the person. If you can still hear me, does that make sense to you? You should type in into YouTube if that makes sense.
Well, thank you. I think she will. The person will reply a bit later.
Yeah,
later, I guess.
I know that there's a little bit of lag between what
yes, yeah. We're sorry for that.
Yeah.
We started to mention a bit, and you often say that a product comes as a response to a person's struggle, complaint, or a desire to get better at something. Yeah. And sometimes also we link into the matter of the company's objectives and financial results. my question here is, what's your favorite way to frame that first stage of the creation of the product? Could you tell us a bit more about this?
That first stage, you mean the finding of the problem, or?
Well, this data, everything that, basically finding the problem and finding all the data that you need to basically start creating your product, and before coming up with a user story mapping, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. I get afraid by talking about finding all the data or finding the right things. One more, the question was, how do I approach that first phase, or how do you make a case for it?
Well, how you approach the first stage would be great. Yeah.
I use that. One of the things we're trying to do is, first off, your organization does not make money because you made people happy. Your organization trades happiness for money. Meaning your organization has to find people that it can make happier or make desire your products, and hopefully you monetize that, because your organization doesn't pay you with happy people, it pays you with money. So we take software, we build things, and then the people kind of do this miraculous alchemy where they turn our customers and users turn their happiness or their value they're getting back into money that fuels our organization. Now, organizations need money fast, or need money. They need to keep sustaining themselves. They need to keep paying you. So there's always a bit of a never fast enough with it. So, the heart of product strategy is often choosing which people and which problem we're going to focus on. Now, I'm saying all that because sometimes putting together your organization strategy, or where you're going to go quarter by quarter, the strategic research should be focused around understanding problems in the market or unmet needs in the market. So some of the problem thinking has already been done even before you see things. If you're a startup, it's your job to do some of that early strategic thinking or find that first problem. But if you're a mature organization, the people doing strategic thinking should be, they're continually looking for unmet needs and unsolved problems. So you often start with a problem, and if they put something in a roadmap, you've already got a bet that this is the thing that will solve the problem. And your job as a product person is to do just enough that you're confident that this is a big enough problem worth solving. And the just enough part is hard. I see people leaping to solutions way too quickly without understanding the problem deeply enough. And I see people getting lost, and we can't move forward unless we really think through or understand the problem. And the organization will lose patience with that, because the organization, again, needs to turn that problem into a solution that generates money. And it's a long journey. How do I approach that? It's not the same with all problems. Some problems are obvious. Some problems you've got direct experience with. Some problems you understand the users and you have empathy. Some problems are dead obvious. And digging in a little bit will expose some subtlety that helps you better test a solution. And you should be testing your solution with the people that have the problems, and that kind of retest the problems. But some problems not so obvious, and so it really depends on the problem. And if it's not so obvious, we learn about the problem with research. By back to the very first question that I think Aurelia asked, it's spending time with your customers and users and building empathy. You can't spend time with very many of them, so you complement that empathy and understanding with some data if you can get it. That subjective and objective stuff complement each other, and really it's just a test of confidence. You keep asking yourself, what would you bet that you understand this problem, or that you understand it well enough? Maybe the last piece of guidance there is, if you're spending more to understand the problem than the ultimate impact your organization expects to get anyway, stop. It doesn't matter. If it's taking a long time to explore the problem and the solution is not likely to impact your organization much, then move on to a bigger problem or a better problem. Does any of those things help?
Okay. Thank you. let's now imagine that we found a right problem to solve, and then you decide to, let's say, start with a user story mapping. Someone in the community was saying, okay, we all know user story mapping, but what's the story behind it? Could you share a bit of clue to us?
If I have, I've got a lot of pressure, or I need to write a second edition of the story mapping book. And if there's one thing I would turn up the volume on is a lot of people will use story maps to describe their solution or map the feature, the thing they'd like to build. Actually, I think I may want to turn the camera back on so I can show something. But over and over, and definitely in the story map, I draw this now and later map, where now has people that have problems and needs, and later has happy people that have your solution and do things. Now, if you're a product manager, you're going to have to predict the future. You're going to have to say, if we deliver this feature, people will do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. So you're telling a story about what they do, and you break it down into the details of the feature you would deliver. And I call that a solution map. But Max, one of the most important maps you build isn't this. The last question you ask is, how do I understand the problem well enough? That's one of the first things that I will do, is take this user and say, look, what are they doing today? They do this, and this, and this, and this, and right around here, they're struggling. They've got problems, and you want to expose the problems or needs. And we use a map to understand our user's journey as it is now or today. This ends up being one of the most important maps, and it does not. This is how we dig deep in understand the problem. We often take that map, and that's the first one I often build, is this kind of map, and then I patch it. I say, okay, if that's the problem, all we need to do is change a little bit of what's going on in here in order to make a better later, a better future. So I'll often build a map here. But some people get bound up around the idea that everything they put in a story map is a story that goes into the backlog. It is not. In fact, your goal is to put lots of stuff in the map that you never intend to build. I stuff my solution maps with lots of options, things that I could do. Some options that are mutually exclusive. I play the good, better, best game a lot. Like if that user has to do this, what's a good way to do it? What's a better way to do it? What's the best way to do it? Sometimes what's the crappy but it works way? What's the impossibly good way? And all I need to build is one of these. But I'll expose lots of things that I don't turn into tickets, actually tickets into Jira or some a story that goes into a backlog. I want to expose options here, things I could do. So look, start with a map that, if you can, start with a map that explains how the users do things today. Everything you write down isn't work to do. Use that to really make sure you understand the problem. Find out how to fix the problem, imagine a better solution. And then as you're imagining a better solution, consider good enough, better, and best, and lots of variations of those. Max, what was the original question? I think I lost myself along the way. Did I answer it?
The question was about the story behind the tool that you came up with, basically. How did you get on to find this user story mapping?
How did I find it? Okay, yeah. So look, oddly, the way I found it is I learned a design practice. It's all the way in the back of the book in the acknowledgement. Years ago, I learned a design practice called usage-centered design. And as a part of usage-centered design, there's still a book, a guy named Larry Constantine, who was an old mentor of mine. One of the practices that is in usage-centered design is task modeling. And what Larry taught me to do was say, look, write down the tasks or the short verb phrases that people are doing. And Larry would have us arrange those in a map so we could see the relationships between tasks. I found out that I was too lazy to do it the way Larry wanted, and I would just arrange it in a story. And I started doing things like that. But then the first time I started wanting to do this, I found that I couldn't ask people what they wanted me to build, but what I could ask people to do is tell me what's going on today. and they can tell you what they're doing today. And the first thing I learned how to do this, super helpful, great idea. And then in practice, I immediately started shifting back to do this. If we go all the way back to what a story is, and if a story is focused on shared understanding, I built the knack or acquired the knack for how can I get shared understanding. And I learned pretty quickly that visualization is key, and I need shared understanding of the problem so that I can come up with shared understanding of a solution. And those maps just allowed me to better unpack what I understood. It was sort of an accidental thing, but the other thing to point out is people have been doing this for years. This kind of map about the problem is often called the journey map. It says that term in the story mapping book. I started really focusing on solution maps, and again, partly from learning about that design practice. But yeah, that's my origin story. But lots of people have been building maps like this for a long time. Maybe two things to add to that. I thought I coined the term story mapping until someone pointed out to me that look, at least in the US, if you go to Amazon.com and Google story map, the first books you will get will be stories on screenplay writing. This technique of using cards to look, people writing a screenplay would do a scene by scene by scene and then decompose each scene to what's being said and done and what people see. People writing books will do a map that's chapter by chapter by chapter. This is an old practice. Just thinking through a storyline visually is an intuitive, is a natural thing. So I'm not the only one to have done that. I'm sure other people have also. That's it. That's all my origin. Explaining a lot more than I needed to, but
no, it's actually perfect. Sarah, who's there with us, has a question to stay on the same topic of user story mapping. Sarah.
Hi, it's nice to see you, Jeff. Thank you for coming. So we've been talking a lot about product management. So I may be a bit off track here, but I wanted to ask you if you've worked with HR or sales or marketing teams using user story mapping. If so, have you seen benefits? Like, were there different benefits? And do you have tips or best practices to share?
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. Again, the minute I hit drawing mode, I can't get back out of it. You said, Sarah, you said HR and sales, correct? Look, if I'm in HR, I'm going to make some guesses here. I believe that everything is a product. Everything can be productized. So if HR is a product, yeah, it's a kind of a service, and it's customers and users include your organization and include employees. HR will often get involved in recruiting, so new recruits, people that are not yet employees. Okay, that's your audience. And then look, you ask yourself, what do they do in HR? Well, the organization will, or let's say leaders, evaluate employees. They might complain about a problem or seek a raise or time off or things like that. Recruits will apply for work. Now, look, every time you've got a short verb phrase, you can map it. I can map how leaders evaluate employees today and find the problems and improve that process. And now HR's product is helping people manage human resources better, or you're improving the product. And what HR doesn't, HR doesn't evaluate. In some organizations, they might evaluate the employees themselves, but HR should give guidance to leadership on how to better do that. HR should find tools to support doing this better. And it's understanding the service HR provides and who its customers and users are, and what services you choose to help people with and what you're not. And then the story mapping part, you're mapping people's journeys. You're mapping how people do things today. You're imagining a different or better journey. But the journey isn't how they click buttons in software anymore. It's how they do something. If I talk about story mapping, it probably fits. Everybody knows there's a huge intersection between product management and user experience design. These are hard disciplines to separate from each other, but story mapping is thinking about the user experience. The term CX for customer experience is the term we use when we're mapping a customer's journey through a product and service that may cut through technology products or cut through face-to-face services. And what we're worrying about here is using maps to get at your customer's experience. That's the big answer I've got. And yeah, no one can read my scribbly drawings or writing, but it helps me think it through to do that. Sarah, did I get at
yeah, I'm convinced it can work as well. I was just curious. I wanted to know if you have already worked with people or non-product teams.
Me personally, no, not yet. It's funny, I have a good friend of mine who works for a big .com here in the US, and she's been working with HR for the last year plus. And she said what was interesting is, again, she's been somebody I've worked with at past companies. She's anybody I work with, I can't shut up about this product crap. So they become product centric. And she said the HR group she's working with has embraced product thinking better than the product people. The product people in the organization have the problem that's the answer to the very first question I asked. The product people have slipped into the project management mode where they believe their job is to get more stuff built faster. HR, on the other hand, doesn't have this pressure to get more stuff built faster. They know that the outcome they're looking for are happier employees, things like that. So I have somebody I can connect you with that's worked with HR. Gosh, there's a friend of mine that I co-teach with, Jeff Patton. There's an article he wrote about that I'll reference on how to productize anything, and he uses HR as a way of doing that. So, yeah, me personally, no. People I know, yes, and it kind of works the way that I described to you at a high level, but the tactics of doing that are tougher. Maybe the only other thing to point out, I use the term output, outcome, and impact a lot. Output is what you do, and we all fall in the habit of making a plan to do something and grading ourselves on how quickly we did what we said we were going to do. We grade ourselves on the quality of what we did. In fact, that grading ourselves on output is something that has been beat into us since childhood, because that's all the school you went to did, is ask you to complete an assignment, and it had requirements, and you did what you said you were going to do, and it was graded on the quality. And then nobody ever looked at the contents of that paper you wrote ever again. It wasn't used for anything. We get used to doing that, but what we need to focus on is the outcome. For instance, if I did improve the way leaders evaluate employees in the organization, how would I know it? Would the people be more happy? Would they stay on the job longer? And the important thing to think of is and start to pay attention to are, what are the outcomes you focus on? That's the trick to being product centric. Or what outcomes are we paying attention to? How would we measure them, even if it's subjective? For hiring new recruits, one metric to pay attention to is what the cycle time is between when we contact someone and when we actually get them hired in the door. And we want to track how fast that moves, because companies benefit if we can get good people in here quicker. We can anyway look for outcomes to measure. That's the other thing to do. And there's sometimes when you're thinking about something that's not actually a software product, it's sometimes a little bit easier, I think. Yeah. And how do you how would you said what an outcome is? How would you define an impact? Yeah. Actually, I'll have to. So I am more and more lately, I'm a little bit more razor sharp about that definition. Now, I'm gonna share again. Just flip this over the output. Look, if we move from idea to something we can deliver, that's the output, and that's the stuff we measure time, cost, scope, and quality on. The outcome is what your customers and users will do, say, and think. If we deliver something, they've got to, I'll use this mantra, if they see it, try it, use it, keep using it, and say good things. For product people, you may recognize this as a common loop of acquisition, activation, retention, referral. It's just a lot more syllables to say the same thing. With this, these are the outcomes we measure. But what matters is in your organization has a different, all your users have needs, things that they need to do, but your organization needs to sustain itself. It sustains itself with cash, as many currency symbols as I can come up with here. It sustains itself with cash. It needs return on investment. Your users don't need return on investment. Your organization needs return on investment. If you deliver something and one person uses it, I promise you it's not going to give you ROI. You deliver a product, which should be a leveraged investment, and a lot of people use it. That gets something your company needs. I use impact when I'm talking about products to say these are the things your company needs. It's impactful if it helps your organization sustain itself and grow and meet its strategic goals. But we trade money for software, and we hope that the outcomes are there to turn that money we put into software back into money that the organization can use to sustain itself. But again, for internal products, it gets a little squishy. The retention rate of employees and employee satisfaction, those are benefits or assets to an organization. So the aggregate of people's satisfaction is an impact, but an individual user's satisfaction might be an outcome. But if you deliver something to 1 million people and 5 people are super satisfied, that's a good outcome for 5 people, but it is not going to have a business impact. That's if it benefits the organization, it does not.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Maxime, I propose to take another question from YouTube. What do you think? Okay. So Pablo says hi, and he has a tricky question. He's asking, what happened when you are confronted with stubborn people that don't really care about product? What is your favorite escape strategy?
It's to escape. It depends on how they don't care, or I think everybody sort of cares. I don't know if I have an escape strategy. It often is to say, okay, how much do I want to convert this person? And if I don't care, then I will. My escape strategy is to say, oh, I've got to be somewhere and leave. But if I do want to convert them, or if I want to help them better understand this stuff, and if I've got time, I might ask them, tell me about something that you worked on or you were really proud of, and why were you proud of it? And chances are they'll tell you a story about an outcome. They're not going to tell you. They'll tell you about how they felt when the thing that they built really benefited someone. They'll tell you about the pride they felt. And then I can say, well, yeah, that's why we build any of this stuff, is so we can feel that. So for the thing you're working on right now, what do you think would make you feel that same way about what you built? And that's going to move the attention to the outcomes. Now, if I'm working with engineers or leadership, all the way back to the first question that Aurelia asked, spend more time with customers. One of the things I'll always do with, and I always have done with engineers from the beginning, is make sure when we're trying to figure out how our product works today, make sure I always bring an engineer or someone with me there. If anybody's ever watched someone use your product, for the people listening, think back to the first time you watched someone use a product that you created, and remember how horrifying that was. That they struggle with it. They weren't using the way you thought. It was frustrating to them, and it was made you feel bad because you thought you'd done a better job than that. The thing that tends to win over engineers is to see maybe sometimes the challenges or the problems they've created for people. They become mindful that what I do matters. And that's what, for me, makes people product thinkers, is helping them see that what they do matters. Sometimes their organizations insulate them so much from their customers that they forget that what they do matters. That ends up being your job as a product person, is to help them understand what matters. First thing, you got to understand why it matters. Second thing, you got to help everybody else in your organization understand why it matters. That's all I've got. That's what comes to mind.
Thanks. Maxime?
Yeah, I think we have another question from Alex in the chat. He's asking, Jeff, how can I help a team that is used to work in waterfall and transitioning to agile to slow down and start focusing on the value instead of the delivery?
The focus on the delivery at its root ends up being a cultural problem in the organization. I don't remember who said this, but employees in an organization value what their leaders value. And if they've worked in an organization for years that values the on-time delivery of what you said, no amount of agile thinking, if the value that they perceive as most important is delivering what they said they would on time, because that's what it looks like their leaders value, it's hard to get them to focus on the other kind of value, that outcome and impact stuff that we've been talking about. And so how do you get them to value? Sometimes I find that I've got to go up to leadership and say, ask leadership to drop in and say why what you're building is important, and how we expect people, our customers, will use it, and why using that benefits the organization. I usually find that leaders actually know that. They just didn't tell anybody that. They just told people build this roadmap item, but they chose it for a reason. How I get them to start thinking about the value is to, again, it's the storytelling. It's back to the reason stories exist. That we're meant to tell a story about users and what they're doing and how they benefit. It's to start to create empathy, start to build understanding of who's using it in problems. And then you are fighting against this cultural problem where, as much as you say that helping users matters, they're hearing their leaders saying, deliver this stuff on time. And that's what's valuable. They hear, I will be evaluated better as an employee if I focus on this. And sometimes what you're saying is a distraction. So you've got to realize you're fighting that and attack that before you can start to get them to really think about and focus on value. That doesn't help, but these are hard things.
Yeah, that's very true. Talking about all the hard things, actually, we had a question from Laurence in the community. She was asking me, with the current situation that we are all working remotely, but we still want to use user story mapping. But when you have 7 people or more over the phone or on Meet or on Visio or whatever, whichever tool you use, I mean, do you have any tip to run a user story mapping workshop remotely?
Yeah. Well, first things, there's some general collaboration rules that apply even if you were doing things face to face. For instance, I don't I don't like building a story map with any more than 5 people in the room. And most of them should understand the customers and users. There might be 1 or 2 that are there to learn. So never build a story map with your whole team. Now, once you've got a story map built, you might pull your whole team in to tell the story and have them ask questions and unpack it and better understand it. So don't work with a lot of people. And if you were doing this face-to-face, you would use cards or sticky notes and a whiteboard, and whatever tool you use needs to mimic working with cards, sticky notes, and a whiteboard. It means everybody needs to be able to create a sticky note, everybody needs to be able to change a sticky note, everybody needs to be able to move a sticky note, and that leaves you with tools. That the 2 dominant tools right now are Mural and Miro. Those are tools that allow you to work that way, to everybody can move a sticky note, and in a weird way, they actually work better than walls because we've got this infinite zoom. We can infinitely zoom out and infinitely zoom in, and so yeah, if you're working remotely and you don't use a tool like a Mural or Miro, and I know that there's others that mimic the same kind of capability, yeah, I'll tell organizations all the time, it's COVID. Have you adopted one of these types of tools? And they say, well, no, we haven't. And I'll say, it's like going into your office and removing all the whiteboards and forbidding people to put anything on the wall. That's what you've done. If you don't give people tools, collaboration is both a skill and it requires tools. People have to learn to do it better, and they need the tools to do it. We know what the tools are face to face. It's just it's a different world. It's a different set of tools. Probably more there, but I'll apply a lot of the same collaboration rules. Oh, one other trick that I've learned from teaching, and again, every trick I've learned comes from somebody else who taught me. It gets hard. One annoying thing with Zoom is, or any type, it's hard. We talk over each other. We make sure people's cameras are on so that you can start to use visual cues. And it's hard to have a conversation in Zoom because I can't point at anyone. I can't. So this is where the tool becomes important. You see people waving sticky notes around on Mural to say over here, and I'm talking about this, and people start moving their attention from faces to there. One of the tricks I've learned is this alternating between silence and discussion thing. Gosh, there's a blog post, if I can find it, I'd have to look it up, that talks about 2 minutes of silence, meaning 2 minutes of let's brainstorm, let's move things around, and then 2 minutes of discussion, 2 minutes of silence, 2 minutes of discussion. Make sure you're capturing things, moving things around, and getting your ideas out there. Now we have something to talk about. And we can point at the things virtually on Mural and say, this is what we're talking about, and that helps kind of focus the conversation a little bit better. That's the only hack that I've learned post-COVID and working online and working with tools. I'm sure we'll get better at this. I'm sure we'll find a lot more.
Thank you. I hope Laurence will love the answer. Actually, Laurence had another question, which I thought was interesting. We know that you're working, and you said before that you're working with different clients and have coached many organizations. But based on your experience, what do you consider as your main achievement and the success you're the most proud of as coaching those organizations?
Yeah, there's one thing that comes to mind is organizations beaten out product centricity. They have used traditional management so long that they push their people to perform better, to keep their commitments, to get more done faster, and they don't move the focus to outcome. Now, organizations that build technology products sort of are wired to do that because they can tell how well the technologists build the technology products, and if no one buys the products or uses the products, then you can feel it in the technologists. But non-technology product companies like banks and insurance companies and large retailers retailers. Well, their products are retail experiences, insurance policies, bank accounts, and we build the technology to support that. We build websites and mobile applications and internal tools, things like that. So helping those organizations adapt product thinking. There's a big retailer in the US called Target. If anybody's ever heard of, they're a big chain retailer in the US. They've been around for a long time. I don't know if there's probably not Targets in Europe, but they're in the US and Australia is where I see those things. Target is a retailer. They haven't been product centric, but over time, working with them for years and trying to push this in and cause them to be more product centric, I've seen Target change, not from stem to stern. They've changed their finance process to stop financing projects and start financing standing product teams to build things. Teams understand what their products are. Teams understand what their outcomes are. Even when they're building things for internal use or external consumption by their external customers. If you were to look at target.com, they host an internal conference every year. Actually, I'm almost tempted to share the screen so I can look it up. They host an internal conference every year called Product DNA. Because this has been a thing for Target, and because product thinking is such a thing, they have to reinforce it. They have to educate people. I'm on Target's. Target has an internal learning group called the Dojo, and the Dojo hosts Product DNA. They're based in the US in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and they've got lots of development offices in Bangalore, and the Product DNA is an internal conference every year. First year they ran it, had a few hundred people. It's grown and grown and grown, and now they invite other external organizations to it. If I'm at a Target Product DNA conference, by invitation, they invite other companies that are like them. That ends up meaning banks and insurance companies and other big retailers. People, if you're a software technology company, if you're a software company, you don't have to, it's a little bit of an, if you're Google or if you're Atlassian and you build Jira, you know what your products are technology, but retailers like this don't. So anyway, one of the things I'm proud of is seeing that company culture change. And it took, I think I first started working with them 8 years ago. There's a couple other companies that I can point to where after years of grinding of this stuff, I see the culture start to shift. And those end up being the things I'm proud of. The interesting thing is by the time the culture starts to shift, the people that learn the new culture often don't even know I was anywhere near it because it becomes the way that they work. But I know that I was there. I helped plant the seeds and nurture the initial beginnings. And like for Target, I still show up at their Product DNA conference every year. And, this year it's in June and it's virtual. So anyway, that's the long answer.
Okay.
I answer the question concisely. I have to tell a story for everything.
I'm not sure I understood correctly. You mentioned that you are working on a second edition of your book, right?
There's a lot of things I should be doing. I am not working on a second edition of the book. There's lots of the publisher keeps asking for it. The first edition of the book is there's not much I would change about it. I would refresh a lot of the examples. I would probably turn up the volume on using mapping to understand problems as they are. And then there's more contemporary examples. I might sharpen a little bit of the language. Chapter 1 of story mapping is about how to build a map. Chapter 2 of story mapping is about release strategies, and chapter 3 is about a different kind of release strategy. These days, I refer to those as a release to earn versus a release to learn. A release to learn is to a small market. We're not focused on getting return on investment. We're focused on validating our ideas. That's what chapter 3 is actually about, and that's the way I teach it now. I might sharpen that language a little little bit. And chapter 4 is about what I'd call a development strategy. It's what you build first. I would sharpen my language, especially about how prioritization works so very differently between each of those release strategies. So yes, I've got the book mostly stands well. Yes, I need to do a second edition, but the book that most stresses me is one that I need to get to is a book on product thinking, on a lot of what we've been talking about, and how to apply it to HR, and how do you apply it deep into your organization? How do we apply the same kind of product thinking we use for commercial products to the things we build for our own internal use? How do we start focusing on outcomes, and how do we break the habit of focusing on output? And that's the book I want to write. I'm still trying to crack that nut. I think that's where the biggest need is right now.
You almost answered the question that I didn't ask. So let's finish with this philosophical question. What would be the next big thing that we should learn as a community about product design and product management?
What's the next big thing we need to learn?
Or maybe discover.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's a next. If I knew the next big thing, I'd be richer or something. But the next big thing, well, my next big thing is how do I help everyone? How do I bring everyone in the organization along? The first thing a product manager needs to realize, as an aside, I hate the Scrum term product owner, because it implies there's one person that owns the product. There isn't. The team owns the product. Your organization owns the product. Everybody needs to feel some ownership. A product leader's job is to help people understand and feel that ownership. The next big thing, as a new product manager, I suffered from a little bit of maybe a Steve Jobs syndrome, where I was the smart person. I figured out what to do, and the team needed to do what I said. It wasn't important to me that they understood who the customers were, why we were doing it, because I did, and they didn't need to know. What I learned the hard way is, no, they do need to understand, because it makes them care about what they're doing, and suddenly they start having ideas that improve my stuff, so that matters. Now, the product managers need to learn that role of not just empowering their teams, but empowering their whole organization to understand and care. And applying product thinking in non-product contexts, treating everything like a product, like HR or other things that we build. We need to understand that product thinking there's an old expression that, an American expression, that youth is wasted on the young. Have you heard that before? That it's only old people that can appreciate youth. I'm going to say product management is wasted on product managers. It needs to be better understood by the organization, better understood by everybody, and product people become the ambassadors for that. That's my next thing.
Thank you very much.
Now, I have another next thing. One of the things that I'm mindful of is, and maybe it's, there's another old expression that fish don't talk about water because we're swimming in it. I build technology products, and I assume everybody thinks like a technology product company. And I assume that everybody knows that technology products have changed, especially over the last 10 years. 15, 20 years ago, we bought technology products in boxes on shelves. They were on CDs or DVDs, and they worked like a regular product. You took it home, you installed it, you kept using it. You might buy a new version of it. We'd take Windows 98 and upgrade it to Windows 99. But right around the late 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, 8, with the invention of the iPhone, technology products shifted, changed. We don't buy them in boxes anymore. They don't behave like regular products. They continuously evolve. If you look at any appliance you have in your home, you might have had that appliance for years. And if it broke and you went out to buy a new one, I've done this with appliances. I buy the exact same appliance, and it is exactly the same way as it was years ago. But imagine if Spotify was exactly the same way it was 5 years ago. I worked with Spotify when they were a brand new company, when the only way to sign on was through Facebook and things like that. Imagine if they had never changed. Technology products today continuously change and continuously evolve. And where what product people need to know is, how do we build a product for continuous change? No big bang releases, because we're not boxing it up and building a list of features and benefits like we used to. We need to understand that contemporary products continuously evolve. And when you apply that technology product thinking to traditional products, you get car companies like Tesla that continuously evolve their cars in place. You buy a Tesla, you bought a Tesla 5 years ago, you're still getting updates to internal systems that change or add features or capabilities to that car. You apply technology thinking and sort of continuous change thinking to products, that changes your products. That's a thing that I guess I'm sitting in, but I see a lot of product people that still have that 20th century product mentality, where they need to figure out what the product is and ship it, and it's not going to change. 21st century product changes continuously. Not only do we not need to get it right out of the box, even if you do get it right, it isn't going to stay right because it needs to keep changing. That's a thing that I want more people to understand.
Thank you. Very clear. Thank you very much, Jeff. It was a pleasure to have all these conversations. In the name of our team, we thank you again for joining us, for your time. And all of us, we hope to see you back in Paris one day.
Yes,
the condition will
yes,
allow.
Dragos, as you know, Paris was the last place I was in the world last March of last